We're now going to focus on probably the hardest part of the series, and that is actually adding items to our cart. Now the reason this is going to be pretty difficult is we need to set up our session helper and we need to set up our basket model as well, or at least our basket class, which is going to handle adding items, checking things, and all that kind of good stuff. But we're going to take this nice and slowly. We're going to set up our cart page that we can dump out all of the items that are added to our cart. In the next part, we'll actually be looking at outputting these nicely within a cart summary. So let's start just by, I'm first of all going to update this link here because I can't actually click back to the product index page. And we already know how to do this. What we can do is just come over to our templates here, over to the partials and under navigation. And here is the link we need to update. Now we know we have our path 4 helper. So let's just add this in here. Path 4, and that's just for the home page. So now when we click on this, we're back to our index. Nice, so we can actually navigate between them now. So let's start with our cart controller and the view that we're going to have for the actual cart index page. So if we just head over and create this controller quickly, I'm actually just going to copy my home controller over just to save a little bit of time. So let's create this here. It's just cart controller.php, and we will just update this as we need. So we have cart controller. Let's just get rid of this method here. We're obviously going to need our request and our response. We will probably need our products, and of course we need our views here as well. So what methods are we actually going to have on our cart controller? Well, we're going to have an index. This is going to actually show the cart page. So this will be a list of all of the items that are currently within our cart. And of course, the focus of this part is actually adding items. So we're going to have an add method just here as well. So for the index then, this is going to take in our request and our response so we can do anything with them. So let's add these in here, and it will also take in our view as well. So let's just type in this in here, twig view, great. So why don't we just render out the view here first of all. We'll come back to this add method later when we're actually clicking to add an item. So over in our views then, we can create a cart folder, and inside of here we will create an index file. So index.twig, and this will be our cart. So let's just render this out. So let's return view render, passing in our response, and this will be cart index.twig. And why don't we go over to our root and just update this as well. So for our routing, we have get, and we'll just call this cart. And obviously for our controller, we have cart controllers, and this is our cart controller, and the method we want is index, like so. And we can set a name for this as well, just in case we need to refer to it, which we obviously will do because we're going to be doing a lot of redirecting to this cart index when we add an item so the user can see what's actually in their cart. And for now, that is pretty much it. So if we have set everything up correctly and we head over to the cart page, we now see cart here, great. And what we're going to be doing is while we're adding things, we're going to be using this to dump out everything that's in our cart, just so it makes a little bit more sense. And while we're at it, we can actually link this up to click through to that page as well. That would make a lot of sense. So if we just head over to our navigation again, down here, remember we have our cart where we're eventually going to display how many items are in there. We want to update this as well. So we have path 4 cart.index, and there we go. We can click through to our cart index. So just so we can focus now, I'm going to close everything off and we're going to look at our session support. Now, what we're going to be doing is storing anything that's within the user's cart in a session. Now, the beautiful thing about this is we're going to be creating an interface for this. So if you want to switch this out for something else, maybe into the database or anywhere else, you can very easily do that. So let's start with the interface. We'll define what kind of methods we need, and then we'll create our concrete implementation for this. So under app, we're going to create a new folder called support. This is just where things are going to go, like our session helper and anything else we want to do. And in here, we're going to say storage. So we have another folder called storage. And inside of here, we want a contracts folder for our session storage. So let's create that now. So we can define out our contract by just creating a new PHP interface within here. And this is going to be called storage interface. And I'll speak a little bit about how, if you want to switch this over to the database or anything else, you can do so later. So let's give this a namespace then, obviously, so we can PSR4 auto load it. And this is just cart support storage, and it's within the contracts folder. So the interface then, we just define out with the interface keyword, and we have storage interface. So this gives us a good opportunity to look at what kind of methods we want. And essentially all this is a helper to put things into storage, get things out of storage, delete things from storage, or whatever else you want to do. So we'll start by saying, well, we need to get an item out of storage at some point, and we need to do that by a particular index. So this might be the ID of the item that we've added to the cart, and then alongside this we'll have quantities and stuff. And of course, if we get things, we need to be able to set things. So we're going to have an index here, and we are going to have a value. Now the other thing we want to do is be able to pull all items out of storage. We also want to be able to check if a particular item exists in storage. So by this we can pass in an index just to check if that exists. And then finally what we want is an unset, which will just basically get rid of an item. So that is pretty much all we need. We can create our concrete implementation now, and we do that just within the storage directory. We have our contract, so we can implement this contract, and we know that we have to implement these 6 methods just here. So under storage then, let's create a concrete implementation, and we'll specifically call this session storage.php. Now, when you're done with this session storage, and in fact, when you're done with the entire series, if you then want to switch this out for your database, you would create a database storage file. And if you were doing something else, maybe storing in cookies, which I probably wouldn't advise, but either way, you get the picture. So storing these items in sessions is not a bad idea at all. There's nothing really wrong with this. It just means that it will last for the user's session. You could, of course, take this data, store it somewhere, do what you want with it. So for the namespace, let's say cart support storage. And then here we have our session storage class. And we know that this needs to implement our storage interface. And the other reason we're doing this is that we can add this to our container under storage interface, and it makes things a lot easier. So we also need to be able to, I've just realized, count all of the items in our basket as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a PHP or a standard PHP interface, SPL interface called countable. So let's just use this up here. And I guess what we could do is we could also use a clear method. So let's just add this to here as well. This will get rid of everything within our session storage. So we'll implement that just there as well. So now that we have this concrete implementation, we need to think about how we're going to actually use this. In fact, before that, just one more thing. Let's just pull in that contract. So it's support storage contracts, and it is storage interface. Great. So under our storage interface, or under our session storage, we want to have some kind of bucket to hold things, and we want to be able to give this a name if we want. So we'll start by creating a constructor just here, and into this we will be able to define a bucket name. Now this can be anything, but by default we'll just call it default. You can call that whatever you want by default, and when we actually create a new instance of this, we can define what we want. So here we will store the bucket name, and in here we will say this bucket and set that to the bucket name. Now what's going to happen is if the bucket doesn't exist in the session when we first load the application, what we want to do is actually create that. So this is the first kind of session dealing we're going to have. So we're going to check if within our session we don't have the bucket name. So we provide this in like so. And then if that's the case, we're just going to say, well, session, that bucket name, in this case it will be a property called default within our session. We're going to set that to an empty array. So we will come back to this later. We'll understand how this kind of works. So how do we actually get our session storage and get it working? We need to attach it to our container, and we do this by the interface. So let's grab the interface from just here, and let's come over to our container.php file and just paste this in here. And now what we want to do is we'll add this up here like so, and do what we normally do when we're adding items to our container. And again, in here we have our container interface. Now what we want to do is return a new instance of session storage like so. And then in here what we'll do is we'll pass in cart. That's what we want the bucket name to be. Of course, if we use this session storage class elsewhere, then we'll give another name to it. So that's why we do that. Now we also just need to come up here and say use cart support session, or rather storage, session storage, just so we have that in there. So it's now on our container and we can use this however we want. Let's just fill out the rest of these methods, and when we come to creating our basket class, that will be responsible for using our session storage, and we'll start to see everything working when we start dumping things. So I guess we can start to implement all of the methods that we have defined just in here. The first one is going to be get from a particular index, and in actual fact, let's start with set. That makes a lot more sense. So when we're setting an item in storage, what we're obviously doing is we're taking an index for that, so we can refer back to it later, and we're taking a value. So here, all we do is session. We say this bucket, because we're storing it under a particular bucket to keep it out of the way with anything else. We are placing that within the index that we provide here, and then we're setting the value like that. Really straightforward. And the whole reason we're doing this is just to keep it out the way of our controllers. If we were doing this all within our controllers, it's just going to get so messy. It just means that we have a nice class that has one responsibility, and that's just dealing with session storage. So for the get method then, you'll probably have guessed we just pass in an index, we know that, and then we just take that item out. But to be able to do this, we also want to check whether it actually exists first of all. So I guess what we can do is create down here before we do that an exists method. And this will take in an index to check if that actually exists. So whether or not it exists, we just do a return is set session this bucket. We're going to be doing this a lot because everything's underneath that. And then we're just going to say index. So if that actually does exist, then we'll get a true or a false basically. So for getting then, the first thing we want to do is say if not this exists, passing in that index, then we want to return null. So if it doesn't exist, we'll just return a null value, and then whoever's using this will know that there's nothing in there. And then after that, we can assume it does exist. So we'll say session this bucket, and we want to return that at the index that's been defined. Simple. So the next thing we want to do is grab all items. So public function all. This will just return all items within that bucket. You probably guessed it's really straightforward. We just say return session this bucket, and that will give us all items within that. Simple. So now we are going to get to unset, clear, and count. So for unset, again, this is really easy. So let's create this method here. We know that we need to unset a particular index, and in this case we are just going to check if it actually exists. So we know that we already have this method. We just say if this exists at that index, then only then we want to unset it. So we just use unset, and we say session this bucket index, like so. And that is pretty much it for unsetting. Now we want to say clear. So clear will be responsible for getting rid of everything within our bucket. It's a similar thing to all and get, where get is getting a specific index, all is getting all. With unset, it's unsetting a specific index, and clear is getting rid of everything. So here we don't need to check if anything exists, we just want to get rid of everything within that bucket, or in actual fact get rid of the whole bucket itself. So we just do an unset like that. Now finally, we have implemented this countable interface, which means that we have to define on this method now a count, or on this class, a count method. And all we're going to do here is return count this all. So we're using all, which we've already implemented just up here. And all this will do is just allow us to count how many items are in the session at the moment, or at least within that bucket at the moment. So this is our session storage class done. We've got that out of the way. The bad news is that our bucket class is going to be a little bit more complicated, which is going to use this session storage class. So let's close this off. We'll open it up again if we have any more problems with it. But what we need to do now is under app, we're going to create a basket here. So we're going to have a basket class. I might have said bucket class earlier, but I meant basket class. So inside of here then, we will create a basket class. This will be responsible for actually adding items to our baskets. This is basket specific, but it will use our session support. So here we have basket.php, and let's just set this up. So the namespace for this is cart basket, and the class is basket, like so. So for the basket then, we don't have any interface on this because there's not really any need to have an interface on this. It's not really going to change. There's no other implementation. But what we are going to do is inject into this our storage and also our product model as well. So what we really need to do is take our basket and add it to our container. This means that what we can do later is use this anywhere within our application. We can inject it into controller methods and all that good stuff. So over on container, let's do this now. So here we'll say use cart basket, and feel free to give this class another name if you want to, if it makes sense for you. And down here, we will actually create or add this at least to our container. So we say basket class, and in here again, just as normal, we have our container interface with our current container state. And to actually do this, we just return a new basket, and inside of this we want to accept, or at least pass in, from our container our session storage class and also our product class, like so. So this means that over in our bucket class we can accept these as dependencies and we can use them within this class. So let's set up our constructor now. So construct, and inside of here we will accept session interface, and we're doing this by an interface because we don't need to know about the implementation of it. We know that we just have specific methods. That's why we use an interface, and also our product here as well, so we can use that. So all we need to do is up here just pull this in. So I guess we can grab this over from support storage session storage. We can copy this over here just to save a little bit of time. And we also want to use cart models product. So now we can set these. So we can just say this storage like so. And then here we can say product like so, and then set these as properties at the top. So we have our storage and we have our product just here. Great, so this is the kind of basics of things set up. We know that we're passing these in and we can now use these in our controller methods. Just to kind of give you an idea of this, if we maybe go over to the home controller and let's just pull in our basket here just to see if this works. You can do this anywhere just to test it. And down here, let's say use cart basket. And if we refresh now, we should see, well, we don't, we see a problem. So here, argument 1 passed to the constructor must be session interface. So all this means is that over on our basket, we probably gave this the wrong, so we called it session interface. So it's going to be storage interface. And there we go. So now that that's been injected in, what we can do to test it is down here, just kill the page, and we'll do a var dump on basket like that. And we should see our basket with everything in it. Perfect. So we know that this is there now, and we can use this to add things and do whatever we want. So let's just get rid of this because we don't need it in here at all. And let's get rid of this as well. Okay, so now what we want to do is implement all of the methods on our basket. So this is the ability to add a product to the basket, update a product, so change the quantity, remove a product, clear the basket altogether, which is essentially just clearing the storage that's attached to this, checking if a product exists, getting a product, getting a list of all products, getting all of the item count, so any items in there, we're just going to count them, and also things like getting a subtotal. Now for the subtotal and the refresh method, which we'll talk about later, we can leave them until later on. We don't really need to worry about them until we get to our cart summary. But all of the others are pretty important, and there's a lot to do here. But once again, once we have this set up, the rest of it will be pretty straightforward. So to start things out then, let's say add. This is our add method. Now into this, we're going to take a product. So we're going to type int it as product to make sure that's what we're passing in. And we also want to pass in a quantity as well. Now we need to kind of hook this into other methods that we have as well. So what we can do is we can create a has method because we're going to need that within our add class. And the has method will just check if an item exists. So we pass in a product, this has method, and all we do is we say return this storage exists, and we pass in the product ID. So the product ID, this will make sense a little bit later when we finish this one off. So to add a product then, what do we need to do? Well, we need to add it as a quantity. So we need to say if this has, and then we pass through the product, then here what we want to do is set the quantity to the current quantity plus the new quantity, if that makes sense. Now down here, otherwise what we want to do is update session with product. So we've kind of defined this out. Now what we can do is create our update method. This is just going to be a general method that's essentially going to either add or update an item within the cart. I know this is add, but essentially update does the same thing. It just updates an index and a value. So to update a product, we say update product, and we give a quantity as well. And we can use this to update the quantity also. Now in here, what we need to do is check if a product has stock before we even do anything to it, before we even add it or update it. So we know that we have inside of here our product model, so we can use this to hit the database and check if an item has stock before we add it. So let's just do this now. So we're going to say if not this product, we're going to find this product by its ID. So we're now hitting the database. And then we're going to say has stock, and we're going to pass in the quantity. So if that's the case, we want to throw an exception, and we'll get back to that at the end of this video. Now the next thing we want to do is if the quantity that's been passed in is 0, then what we want to do is remove it. So we're going to call this remove product, and then we're going to return because we don't want to do anything else. So let's just quickly create our remove method. I know this does get a little bit complicated, but essentially all these link together quite nicely just to literally do what we want to do. So for removing a item then, this is really straightforward. We take in the product that we want to remove, and in here we say this storage unset, and we pass through the product ID. So like this, product ID. So that's what's going to happen if we don't have a quantity. If we either add or update, we're never going to add a quantity of 0, but if we update the quantity to 0, we just get rid of it. So the last thing we want to do within our update method is this storage set. So at this point, we are either adding or updating an item. So we set this under the key of product ID. You can refer back to your session storage if you're not too sure. So here we set a product ID and then the actual product details. In this case, it's just an index and a value. So we set the product ID. The details that we are actually setting are an array. This will hold the product ID. So here we're going to say product ID. And just to make sure, we're going to cast this to an integer. And then here we're going to set the quantity. And again, we're going to cast this to an integer. So the whole idea of this is that when we add an item, we basically set a session with the ID as the key. So we can refer back to that later. The actual product ID and then the quantity. And that means that we can at any time see the products we have in our cart and the quantity, but then what we can also do is hit the database and give ourselves a list of all the products based on this product ID. So hopefully that makes sense, but going forward it should make a little bit more sense as well. Okay, so now that we've done our update method, we can go back over here, and here we want to, if the product already exists in our session, or at least in our basket, we want to update the quantity. So we just want to adjust the quantity here. So we just say this get product. We grab the quantity. Remember that when we set it, we set a quantity here. So when we get it, we have a quantity available. And then we just add on the quantity that we've already passed through, essentially just incrementing. So if we already have a product in our basket and we have 2 as the quantity and we want to add 2, we end up with 4, simple as that. And then here we want to update the session with the product. So we just say this update, we pass in the product and we pass in the quantity. So I don't think we've created the get method in here just yet. Nope, we haven't. So let's do this now. So public function get, and all this will do is take in a product to grab out. And to actually get something, all we need to do is return this storage get and grab that by the product ID. It's as simple as that. So far we have adding a product, we have updating a product, we have removing a product, checking if a product actually exists, getting a product. We need a way to clear our cart, and this is also very straightforward. So let's just create a clear method here, and we just say this storage clear. Now obviously what we're going to want to do is when we check out, we want to clear our cart. So that's why we have a clear method in there. So now we want to get all items. Now this is a little bit trickier because what we need to do is all of the items in our cart currently have an ID, a product ID. We want to hit the database and pull a list of the products out. This will grab us a collection of models. So that's really important. We need this to be able to display on our product index page or our cart summary page. So let's create our all method just here. And we're going to start by setting an empty list of IDs and an empty list of items. We're going to need these in just a moment. So all we do is we say for each this storage all, that will give us a list of all products currently in our storage that have been added via the add or update if we're updating the quantity. And for each of these products, we want to add to this list of IDs or this array of IDs. So we're going to say product ID. We've seen this product ID key before, remember when we were adding. And now that we've done that, we can grab the products using Eloquent. So we're going to say products equals this product find IDs. Now this might seem a little bit strange because now what we're technically doing is passing through an array of IDs. This will only take one query. So that's really important. We're just doing one query and pulling however many items we have out. If we have 20 items, we're doing one query. If we have 50 items, we're only doing one query. So that's really important. And now what we want to do is go through all of them products that we have. So for each product as product, we now want to essentially set the quantity, and we grab this from the item in our storage. So we say product quantity, and we're attaching this onto the model so that when we output it, we actually have a property on there called quantity. So we say this get product, and then here quantity, like so. So now what we can do is attach this to our items array, so product, and down here return them items. So just to recap, if this is a little bit complicated, we have two empty arrays just so we can hold things. We're going through each of the items in our storage, in our session, which means any item that's been added. We are then grabbing them items or products from the database. We're going through them products, attaching the quantity based on what's been stored in our session storage, and then we are just adding them to an items array and returning. So that's pretty much it. The last one I want to do is our item count, and then all we need to do here is return this count, or return count this storage, and that's it. So we'll leave it at that for now. We'll come back to this if we've made any mistakes. There's quite a lot being done here, but obviously this only needs to be done once and very rarely updated. You'll probably not need to update this at all. And this is pretty much it. So the only thing I want to do now is just add in an exception if we have too many items, if we have quantity exceeded. So over in basket, we can create a new folder called exceptions, and this will be thrown if we're trying to add too many items to our cart based on the quantity available. So we will call this quantity exceeded exception. We'll go ahead and give this our namespace. So it's cart basket exceptions, and let's use exception because we're going to need that. And we're going to say class quantity exceeded exception, and this extends our just standard PHP base exception. And inside of here, we will create a message just in case we want to use the get message method. And we'll just say you have added the maximum stock for this item. So we are obviously going to be catching this exception from our basket when we try and add too many items, but of course you can handle that in whatever way you want. So now back over into our basket, then we can throw a new quantity exceeded exception here, and of course we need to pull this up here. So use basket, or rather use cart basket exceptions quantity exceeded exception. So we're all set up to go. We've got a couple more things to add down here later on. We'll now move on to actually adding an item. So let's close all this off, forget about it for a moment, and come back to it if we have any problems. What we want to do is we want to click on an item, we want to click add to cart, and we want to add this using the methods that we've just built. And then on our cart page, we can go and dump all of the items in our basket just to see that they're being added properly. Okay, so we need to obviously hook this up. So we already have our controller just over here, and we have this add method. We already have sorted our index method. So for our add method, then we want to add a product by a slug. We want to also accept the quantity for this. We have our standard request in here, and we have our standard response in here that we can use. And we also want to pull in our router as well, so we can redirect off if there are any problems. So up here, we will just say use slim router. We've already seen this in action. So to add an item then, what do we want to do? Well, we know that we have our basket within our container. So we can pull this into our controller. So let's create our constructor just here. And up here we will use cart basket. We will inject this into here. And this is what I was saying earlier. If you want to do this with stuff like your router, you can do. We're going to say this basket equals basket. And of course that should be like that. And we'll just correct this up as well. Now here we're going to say protected basket, and we're done. That should be all we need for now. So to add an item then, we've already done all of the hard work. We're going to grab that product from the database, because remember, to add a product, we need to send it through to our basket add method as a product model. So we're going to say this product, which we haven't set up. So we'll do that in just a moment as well. So where slug is the slug that we pass into this, and we're going to grab the first record. You'll have noticed this from our product detail page as well. So if we can't find that product by the slug, we're going to return a response with a redirection. And from our router, we are going to get the path for the home page. So let's just quickly put in our product model in here, because we do need this. So just say product, and we'll make sure this is pulled in. Yes, it is. And we will add this just here as well. So product, and up here we will duplicate this down like so. Okay, so now that we've done this, then let's just do a die here and say add, just so we know that we can get to this point, because what we need to do is update our router. So to add an item then, we need to adjust this. So we're going to say cart add slug, and then we're going to pass through a quantity like so. And this will be a get again, and we're going to have cart.add like so. And of course, this will use the add method on the cart controller. So we can update our product index page now, our product detail page, sorry. So let's go over to our template, or our views, product, and down here we can update this to go through. So we're going to say path for product, or rather cart.add. And obviously into this, we need to pass the slug and the quantity. So this is just product.slug. And then the quantity, we're just going to assume for this is 1. Obviously, you can update this to do whatever you want, but we're going to pass to a quantity of 1. So now you can see, if you just look at the very bottom and left of the video, you can see that we have add, and then that slug, and then the quantity. So if I click add to cart, it now says add. Perfect. Now if the item doesn't exist, we can't add it to the cart, we're just redirected back. So that works fine. So now that we're at this point, we need to actually add the item. So we're going to keep this up and refresh it, but you can just imagine that we've clicked on the link again. And how do we add an item to our cart? Well, we know that what we can do is use our basket. We can use if we just head over here, we can use the add method on the basket to add this in. So we're going to create a try catch on here, because remember, we can catch if the quantity has exceeded. So we need to actually pull this in. So I'll go ahead and pop it in here now. Quantity exceeded exception, and we'll call that E. For now, we're not going to do anything, but here would be the great point to set some kind of message in the session. And what are we trying? Well, we're just saying this basket add product and the quantity that's been passed in. And then down here, what we want to do lastly is just redirect to the cart index. So let's return response with redirect. And let's redirect, pulling this out of our router, the path for cart.index. That's the index page that we've not done much with. So now when I add one of these, we're redirected over to cart. So it looks like everything worked. But now what we need to do is actually dump out the contents of our cart. So the step we need to take before this is actually pass through our basket class through to every view. So the contents of this to every view. Now to do this, we need to update our container file, and inside of Twig, what we can do here is actually share items with every view that we render. So to do this, we just say twig get environment. I'll just spell that correctly. Then we say add global. We give this a key, so we're going to say basket, and then we're going to say C, which is our current container, get basket class. So now any view that we create, so this one just here, we will have our basket class available to actually grab anything out of. And this will be really helpful because it means that we can go and update our navigation. So we can update the amount of items in there. And we'll do that in just a moment. So the first thing then is just to dump out our basket contents here, just so we can see that it's working. So if we head over to cart index, let's just do this now. So we're going to say basket raw. Let's just see what we get. And this is fine because we're currently trying to dump on the actual basket class and it can't be converted to a string. So what we can do is we can use any methods now on our basket class. So let's just remind ourselves what they are. Well, we have, for example, all, which is really interesting because this now hits the database and pulls all of the items out and should give us a list of all our items. So you can say basket.all. Let's check that out. And again, we get an array to string conversion. That's fine. So we can say, maybe if we were to do JSON encode, that might help us. Okay, there we go. So what we now have is our item in our basket. We know we added this. We have a quantity of 1. We know that. So now what we can do is start to test if this works. So let's go and add a Blake Espresso. Let's add this in. We're redirected back to that page where we're dumping everything, and you can see that that's been added in. And the great thing is, because we're hitting our database within that class, we're actually getting everything out that we could possibly need to display this to the user. So the price, the stock, the quantity. But now let's check if we add another Blake Espresso, how is that going to work out? Well, let's add this to the cart. You can see here the quantity has been updated. Perfect. This is working brilliantly. So what we want to do lastly, because this has taken a long time and it will be the longest part of the series, I promise, we're going to update the navigation just here to output the number of items in our baskets. This is really straightforward. We'll leave this in here for now as well, just so we can refer back to it later. And let's go and head over to our, let's see, templates, navigation. And we want to update this number just here. So if we say in here, remember now that we're passing basket through to every one of our templates, we can just say basket.item count. Now, if we go over to our basket method here, or basket class, sorry, we know that we have this item count, which just does a count on our storage. If you're interested in how count works on this class, remember when we set this up, we implemented countable, which will basically, when we use the count method here, or the count function here, it will go ahead and call this straight away. So that's how that works. So here we have basket.item count. When we refresh, we see 2. So we now have 2 items in our basket. We know that. Obviously, we have more quantity of 1 item, but technically we have 2 separate items in our basket. So there we go. That is adding items to our cart. Take a break, and in the next part, we're going to look at the cart summary. So that is just listing out all of the items in our basket as it stands. I want to give a huge shout out to our friends at Braintree Payments for supporting Codecourse. In the future, there could be a whole new way to pay. Braintree's full stack payment platform is easily adaptable to anything the future holds, so you can easily adapt too. With one simple integration and support for any device, when that new payment method comes out, all you'll have to do is update a few lines of code. No complicated recoding, no late nights, no stress about staying ahead of the curve. Braintree Payments is here to help. You can learn more at braintreepayments.com/codecourse.